let's get to the issue of the current, or at least the recent vote that was made on the border. What is it? The border, when it came to the kind of immigration and the border wall and whatnot. So I have an article here from Robert Reich. He's I think a professor from Berkeley. He's a former I believe department. He's Secretary of Education. Secretary of some. He was He had a former position in the Clinton administration, the Bill Clinton administration, and he is just kind of a pundit or whatever these days on mainstream media and stuff. And then I don't know. I think he writes articles, and obviously, like I said, he's a professor. So he wrote an article about how he talked about how the Democratic Party caved on the issue of border control and immigration. And I just wanted to read this piece here. It's pretty short, but it gives a good breakdown of what happened. And let's check it out. So it says, Dems caved on the border. A week of disgusting images at the border that repulsed a nation ended with Trump getting more money to carry out the same abuses without accountability. That was the subheadline. So here it is. Check it out. It says, while attention has been focused on the Democratic debate in which most contenders are pushing progressive policies, congressional Democrats have moved in the opposite direction. They caved on an emergency border supplemental appropriation that can now be used by Trump to make the border situation worse, not better. This is how it happened, folks. The House had been working on a $4.5 billion emergency border supplemental appropriation designed to respond to the inhumane conditions in migrant holding cells. The goal was to use the funds to improve standards for migrants and include safeguards to prevent Trump from using the money to finance deportation raids or his border wall. But then Mitch McConnell and Senate Republicans, along with a number of Senate Dems, came up with their own $4.6 billion bill containing none of the safeguards to limit the funding to emergency aid, even earmarking some of it to continue Trump's draconian immigration policies, including funding for ICE and funds that could be used for additional tent camps to warehouse more migrants. Chuck Schumer did nothing to keep the House safeguards in the Senate bill. Worse yet, when the Senate bill got to the House, Democratic centrists, led by Josh Gottheimer, organized enough votes to block the House from putting the safeguards back into the bill. Nancy Pelosi caved, accepting a bill her House majority had no hand in writing, and the House passed the Senate version with 129 Democrats supporting it. So a week of disgusting images at the border that repulsed a nation ended with Trump getting more money to carry out the same abuses without accountability. Why were Dems in the Senate and Dem centrists in the House so willing to accommodate Trump on an issue that is exploding into public consciousness? As David Dayen of the American Prospect asks, if Democrats don't have the backs of children sleeping in cages, whose backs will they have? So once again, that was Robert Reich. That's an article from his own website, robertreich.org. And he's absolutely right. He nails it on this issue, and this is another classic example of the Democratic Party, specifically members of the party in Congress. Of course, there's many progressives, and I'll be getting into some of the reactions from progressives on this issue, which was very virulent and very angry. But a lot of the members of Congress that are in the Democratic Party is just horrible. They don't know how to represent their constituents. They don't know how to do what's right for let's just put aside the constituents, which is important, but the Democratic Party as a whole and the people that are voting for the Democratic Party, the people that are sick of this system and sick of how things are just being done, just as they've always been done, and people are just, they're sick of dealing with it. They don't want to deal with that anymore. And they constantly cave on these issues, and they can never take a strong stance on any of the things that they claim to take a strong stance on. And I mean, it's people on the progressives have been saying this forever. We have been pointing this out multiple times for I don't know how long now, talking about how the Democratic Party just does not stand up for its base. It does not stand up for the things that Democrats demand. They just don't know how to stand up for anything hard enough to pressure Republicans to do what is right. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, it's sure, okay, you can make the case that it's about, the parties working together and the, coming to a consensus. And then, it's really tough to get this through because, like we got more people. So for example, like, when a certain party, controls one chamber or the other chamber or something, and then, let's say, especially if they support both chambers and they had the presidency, okay, that's understandable. You get the policies through much easier when you have control. You have control of both chambers and the presidency. Okay. But that's not the case here. You have the Congress. You have control of the Congress. The Senate's not too close. It's like, I think the Senate right now is 53-47 or something. But it's close. It's not super like, oh my God, like Republicans are controlling everything like at an alarming rate. No, it's not like that at all. So people that, pretend like the Senate can't do more on these issues is, ridiculous. So, but yeah, Democrats just can't stand up for these policies. And when it comes to the issue of immigration and border control and stuff, like this is an issue that just Trump loves, man. Trump loves to push all this, fear mongering about immigrants doing this and doing that, and they're all the people that are coming across the border are they are killers, murderers, and drug cartel, like every person that's coming across, even though many of them are kids and women and children, and maybe even a lot of fathers, I'm sure too, and they're claiming, oh no, those are drug cartels. Those are those are killers and murderers that are, trying to, fight for the drugs that they want, because obviously there's a lot of fight going on regarding illegal drugs, where the cartels are killing people for that. But that doesn't mean that every person that crosses the border is a member of a drug cartel. I would be surprised if it was even more than like 1%. I don't even think it's that much. So yeah, but it's just absurd, and you can't. This is the thing. You always, every time the Democrats have to take a strong position on something, every single time they capitulate. And I've talked about this I've talked about this issue on the podcast multiple times before, and that's why I can't trust Democrats to do these things. And when we get these idiots into Congress, we expect them to take committed, solidified positions on the subjects that we demand of them. And obviously a lot of times when it comes to, especially when it comes to issues that where they obviously, I don't know, obviously they can't see, they obviously don't seem all that committed to, especially when it comes to matters of foreign policy, immigration, healthcare, all that stuff. They obviously don't know how to take a strong stance on it, regardless of what the voters or the Democratic, the typical kind of Democratic voters demand of them. And just because they're not as bad as Trump, people don't want to go after them that hard, and they keep electing them into office, and it's just shameful. And they keep getting appeased to do these things more and more. So. So there was an article from Common Dreams, written by a great writer, Jake Johnson, who he's written a lot of great articles. I think a couple that I've read on this podcast in the past before too, and he details the anger coming from progressives who called out Chuck Schumer and Pelosi for the capitulation to the Republican Party and Mitch McConnell and Senate Republicans. So. The title of the article is Spineless. Schumer and Pelosi under fire after Democrats joined GOP to give Trump $4.6 billion in border funding without protections for children. Quoting, I think it was Pramila Jayapal? Yeah. Pramila Jayapal says, Schumer is as much responsible for this as Pelosi. It's appalling. So it says, I am looking for a new pharmaceutical drug that builds spines. That was Representative Pramila Jayapal's reaction on Thursday after House Speaker Nancy Pelosi capitulated to Republicans and so-called moderate Democrats by agreeing to pass a $4.6 billion Senate border aid package that contains virtually no protections for immigrant children detained by the Trump administration. While Jay Powell and other progressives were quick to note that Pelosi deserves criticism for approving the Senate legislation, which was strongly opposed by the Congressional Hispanic Caucus and immigrant rights groups, they argued Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer should share the blame for failing to whip his caucus against the measure. On Wednesday, the Senate passed the $4.6 billion Republican border bill by an 84-8 margin. 33 Democrats, including Schumer, voted yes. Oh my God. Wow. Handling Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell an easy victory. Progressive Democrats said Schumer's failure to fight the Republican legislation left the House with no leverage to negotiate stronger protections for migrant children who are currently enduring horrific conditions in Border Patrol detention facilities in Texas and elsewhere. After Pelosi announced Thursday that she would reluctantly support passage of the GOP Senate bill, despite progressive outrage, the legislation sailed through the House Thursday evening with the backing of 129 Democrats. Listen, Jay Powell told reporters, I think Leader Schumer and all the Senate Democrats have to understand that we need them to stand up and oppose. Jay Powell also slammed Pelosi's decision to give in to McConnell and so-called moderate Democrats in an interview with Politico, saying we can't say that we have a lawless administration or a president who should be in prison or whatever people want to say about him, but then cave. You have to fight for what you believe. And this is a tweet from Jay Powell. It says, when Senate Democrats overwhelmingly vote with Mitch McConnell for a bill that has no provisions to make sure children get the care they need, then yes, I will call them out. With an 84-8 vote in the Senate, it gives us no room in the House to push for the accountability we need. This is a tweet from Jay Powell where she's quote tweeting Manu Raju, who's a reporter for, I believe, CNN, detailing the here it says the sniping back and forth between Democrats, between the moderate Democrats and more left-leaning Democrats. It says Jay Powell's anger at the Democratic leadership for refusing to fight the Senate bill was echoed by Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Democrat of New York, who said Pelosi's decision to capitulate to McConnell was an unacceptable, quote, abdication of power, end quote, that will give the Trump administration a blank check to continue harming children at the border. Quoting Ocasio-Cortez, it says, the problem right now and the question at hand is Mitch McConnell sent us a bill and we're putting a big check mark on it instead of even trying to negotiate. Ocasio-Cortez, who opposed all new funding for Trump's deportation force, said during an interview on CNN. What Mitch McConnell is doing is that he's relying on the time pressure of July 4th recess to try to ram through a bill that is completely irresponsible. Yeah, that's very true. They always want to get over to their fucking vacations and shit, so they they try and ram through bills and legislation as much as possible so they can go on their fucking vacations. Even though you had multiple days, you had more than a week at least, right? This was, I think, when was this from? This was from, around 27th, 28th. Yeah, I mean, that's more than a week until July 4th. You can wait until then? Fucking lazy ass motherfuckers. It says Representative Ilhan Omar, Democrat of Minnesota, also spoke out against the passage of the package and said the funding was a wasted opportunity to help children who remain in dire need. This is quoting her Twitter. She said, she tweeted out saying, nothing we did today will make sure that kids will have a proper place to sleep. Nothing we did today will make sure kids aren't kept in cages. We had an opportunity to address a humanitarian crisis and we wasted it. Let's see, here it says, as the New York Times reported Thursday, Pelosi's decision to approve the Senate bill came after she received private assurances from Vice President Mike Pence that the Trump administration would abide by some of the restrictions she had sought. They included a requirement to notify lawmakers within 24 hours after the death of a migrant child in government custody and a 90-day limit on children spending time in temporary intake facilities, the Times reported, citing a person familiar with the discussions. The restrictions Pelosi reportedly pushed for amounted to less than the protections Jayapal sought in House negotiations over the border aid package. In a statement on Thursday, Jayapal said she pushed for strong guardrails to specify that children should get food, water, medical care, and legal services, that no child should be kept in these facilities for more than 90 days, and that private for-profit contractors who violate these standards would have their contracts terminated. That's pretty strong. 90 days, though, is a lot, isn't it? And no kid should be even kept in those places for 30 days. That's crazy. At least fucking find a way to get them back into the country, even though they're not, or at least, yeah, somehow, I don't know. But 90 days is crazy. It says it's Pelosi's private negotiation with Pence, which ended with no binding restrictions, sparked fury on social media. Schumer is as much responsible for this as Pelosi, but yes, it's appalling, tweeted the nation's cheat here. It says, let's see. Final part here, it says, Alexander McCoy, political director for anti-war group Common Defense, noted on Twitter that Pelosi is deservedly getting a lot of the flack for allowing Republicans to ram through legislation that was strongly opposed by immigration rights groups and the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. Nothing excuses writing a blank check for concentration camps, McCoy wrote, but skating under the radar are Schumer and Senate Democrats who deserve just as much blame for the spinelessness who gifted McConnell his leverage. Yeah, this article and everything detailed in it says exactly what I just said earlier in the segment. These people, the Democratic Party, they just don't know how to stand up for anything. They don't know how to stand up for the policies that are right for this country. They claim to, but they don't actually do it. So when they go out there and they talk about how kids are in cages and we need to get we need to end these terrible conditions for young children, let alone just humans in general being kept in cages is crazy. But kids, and then kids being killed, along the border, people, being shot out along the border and being treated like animals, essentially, which not even animals should be treated like that. But, having to suffer through those things just because they're fleeing the ridiculous carnage that is being created by drug cartels. Somehow they have to suffer because drug cartels are fighting over the possession of illegal drugs. So, but that's the thing. They don't do those, they don't even mention those details. But I mean, mainly they just like to talk about how kids are being kept in cages, but then when it comes to passing policies that's going to improve that situation for children like that, they don't do it, and they give in, they capitulate. They sell away the farm basically, and then nobody holds them accountable for it because they keep getting elected in those positions and they don't get held accountable for anything. And this is why we need to have more progressives in Congress. At least we have people like Ocasio-Cortez and Jayapal and Ilhan Omar, Mark Pocan is another one that's one of the progressives out there. These are the people that need to be those that need to be like the politicians that are have the highest positions. Why the fuck do we have this horrible speaker Nancy Pelosi multiple times being voted as speaker? Luckily this past time she got a lot more pushback, but that's not the person that deserves to be the Speaker of the House, because clearly you can't, what was it, 129 Democrats voted for this border bill, which basically is more conservative and more of what Donald Trump and the Republicans want. 129 Democrats voted for that in Congress. And how many did it say for the Senate? It was an 84-8 vote. So, I mean, it must have been at least, 30 of them at least in the Senate? I can't find the number here yet. But, yeah, it must have been at least 30, because if there's, 47, 48 Democrats in the Senate, and 53 something, yeah, you have to get at least 84, yeah. Must have been at least 20 or 30. Either way, though, I mean, it was a big chunk of Democrats in the Senate, let alone the Congress. So, it's shameful. I don't know what is going to have to happen to get these people to fight harder for actual actual progressive policies that the Democratic Party claims to believe in. And they clearly do not.